Have you ever been in a building that just made you feel uncomfortable? You know you don't like being there, but it's hard to specify why. Maybe it's a movement in the corner of your eye that makes you feel like you're being watched. Or perhaps it's the maze of hallways and identical doors that makes you feel trapped. Today we speak with author Beth Castrodale about the ways architecture can make you feel comfortable or haunted, and which styles of buildings are more likely to have ghosts in them. Do you live someplace that's prone to supernatural activity? Find out today on Homespun Haints. Hello, Hainted Loves. Welcome to Homespun Haints. I'm Becky.
Hey, I'm Diana.
Today we are venturing up to Boston.
Spooky. Well, spooky adjacent.
It's spooky. It's spooky. Oh my gosh. The place is so old.
I love Boston. Every time I go there, I'm like, why haven't I moved here yet?
So we're going to be talking to Beth Castrodale today. She is an author. There's some ghost stories in there, and there's also a discussion of how architecture can affect the hauntings in your home. It's going to give you a lot of things to think about before you buy a new house or look for a new apartment.
Indeed. We've talked before about how hauntings can influence architecture, like the Winchester House. It seems there's some strange correlation between architecture that's influenced by a haunting and architecture that promotes a haunting.
Mm-hmm. Like Victorian mansions.
Your house is this tornado of haunting and architecture that goes around and around.
We're really excited to talk to her about that. And speaking of architecture, I have this really bizarre development that has happened in my life.
What has the squirrel that ate through the wall done now?
No. The squirrel's being dealt with. I think one of my cats got a hold of parts of him yesterday. So,
good hunter.
Diana, you know how I've had this recurring dream since I moved into this house that I'm wandering through a house and I discover an extra room that wasn't there before.
I do know this dream. Haunted Loves, you remember this.
It's apparently a very common dream if you are about to have part of your mind open up. It's supposed to be a positive thing, but these dreams have always been, I don't know, haunting in a way. I'll just say that. There's just something that's bothersome about them. And I've been having this dream ever since I moved into this house that I'm currently in. Well, this house that I live in is stupid.
Stupid house.
It's architecturally stupid. There's
oh dear.
It really is. There's like so many odd angles. It's an 80s contemporary because I'm a weirdo and I chose it. Like I sought out an 80s contemporary. I was like, that looks weird. I want that for myself. And it has all sorts of massive chunks of unused space that you can't do anything with. And like I said, it's just stupid.
The same thing, like when my mom bought an RV and there's 2 sinks in the RV, one for the bathroom and one for the kitchen. But the bathroom sink doesn't fit in the bathroom because the bathroom's small in an RV, so it's across the hall from the bathroom. But so is the kitchen sink across the hall from the bathroom. So you can literally wash one hand in each sink at the same time. But we needed both, even though square footage is at a premium.
That actually sounds like a building code thing.
There's no code for a trailer. You could put a bed on top of a bathtub and it's fine.
I'm going to remember that next time I build a trailer. Totally going to do that because that's in the cards for me. No. Okay, yeah, I don't know this house. Who built it and why? Because it's odd. And the crazy thing is it's a layout that's repeated multiple times throughout my neighborhood. So whoever created this house didn't just do it once and say, oops. They're like, oh, that's fantastic. We'll have like hallways that go to nothing. And
they probably built 700 or 800 houses from the same plan before anybody actually gave them any feedback on it, huh?
Probably.
Didn't ask the real customer. See?
We have this part in our house called a bridge. If you have an 80s contemporary, you might know what a bridge is. So
is it just a balcony, basically?
It's basically a balcony that's open on both sides.
Oh, okay.
So it's a bridge. It's a bridge that goes from and the top floor, because, 80s contemporaries have these huge vaulted ceilings. So if you want an older home, it's the only way to have an open floor plan is to do one of these 80s contemporaries. So it's huge vaulted ceilings. And then there's like basically a bridge, a strip of floor that goes from the top floor across the top of the, call it a great room. It's really a living room, but it's great, I guess. Not. Anyway, and then it just ends at a wall. Doesn't go to anything.
I figured that the reason that was in your house was for puppet shows, specifically. I figured that if anybody in your house knew how to run marionette puppets, like on long strings, they could stand up there and do a puppet show for the living room.
Well, that could also be why the banisters had enough space between them for a small child to fall through when we moved in.
Right, a small puppet.
When we moved in, we had to bolt pieces of plywood to the banisters to keep the children from falling through. And people would come over, they'd be like, "Oh, that's so cool. Are those sound panels? I know you're a musician." I'm like, "No, it's literally just pieces of plywood that are bolted to the stairwells to keep."
It's literally just baby death prevention. That's all it is. Not a decor feature.
There were like just different colors. Some were half painted. The kids had drawn all over them. It was not bougie. It was embarrassing to have anybody come over. They'd come in and they'd be like, "Oh, that's different." I'm like, "Yeah, welcome to my house."
Probably keeps your crazy cats from launching themselves onto your heads.
No.
No, they still do that?
No, they just get up higher and go off the railings. So anyway, back to the bridge. Okay, so at the end of the bridge, whoever built the house, because this is original to the house, was like, "Oh, there's a bridge that goes to a wall. We should do something with it." So they put a bookcase in. Basically made the bridge even narrower. So there's no room to put like a chair or a light or anything. It's just a random bookcase at the end of a bridge. It gets covered in dust. And you always forget about the books that are over there because nobody goes there because it's a completely unused part of the house.
Horrible feng shui.
It looks horrible, too, from the ground floor. So when we ripped out the plywood and put in real banisters, we pulled out the bookcase. And I brought over an interior designer and I said, "Look at this space. What can we do with it?" And she said, "Put in a bookshelf." So,
whap, whap.
I know. I was like, what? Okay, so I was like, "That's stupid. We just pulled one out." And she's like, "Aha, make it a recessed bookshelf." It looks nasty, where the paint has been pulled off the wall and raw drywall exposed in the shape of a bookcase there right now. So
the ghost of a bookcase remains.
And she's like, "If you do recessed, maybe you'll have room to put a little chair. You can have a reading nook." I was like, "Okay." So got the guys over here yesterday. And I was like, "Can you punch through that wall and see if there's space?" Well, they did it with a saw, not with their fists. They're not related to me. If they were related to me, they'd probably use their fist. So
they're high-heeled kicking boots.
That's true. Oh, I should have used my heel. I should have done a back. Well, it's a good thing I didn't kick it in because I may have fallen to who knows where.
Ooh, secret passageway?
Oh my gosh, it gets good. It gets good. So I hear the guy like sawing out the wall, and I hear, "Good God!"
Uh-oh. How many cats did they find?
No, there's no dead cats in my walls.
Okay.
Just dead squirrels. So he opens it up, and we look inside, and there's 40 square feet of space just there in the wall.
That's nearly half of the living space in my van.
Yeah.
This is half a house you found.
We found half a house.
By my standards. Maybe not
No,
yours.
I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of space. And I was like, "Oh, we're not getting a bookshelf. We're getting a library."
Nice.
So all of those dreams are coming true. There was an extra room in my house.
Oh.
I just hadn't discovered it yet.
So have you stopped having the dream since you discovered it?
Well, this is only yesterday, so it's a little too soon to know. But yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I didn't have it last night. This is the funny thing. I keep thinking of this room. I keep wanting to build it as a secret library. We're going to make it into like a little secret library, and it's going to have... They wanted to do a secret door on it, but I was like, no, because that's going to look stupid now. You're going to be like, okay, it's still just a hallway going to nothing. Like, I want it to be obvious there's a freaking door there that goes to something. So just, just for visual sake. But, you're not going to expect that. Nobody expects a library at the end of a bridge. They're just going to think it's a closet, and they're going to open it up and it'll be like, ooh, a library. But
Aw.
I keep thinking of the room at the heart of the house in the Netflix series Haunting on Hill House. I keep thinking of that room as being like this room. It's going to be the room of requirement. It's going to be the room that we all need when we need it. And I think I need a library right now. So that's what it's going to become. But maybe for somebody else, it will be something else. My husband talked about it being a place to podcast from, a place to take meetings from.
Subtle.
I know, right? My daughter wants to bring all her friends over there and have it be their hangout space.
I was going to say your kids are going to need somewhere to sneak kisses when they become teenagers.
I found a room in my house that wasn't there before.
A real room.
Real room.
Did it correspond with your dream in any other way?
Well, I have yet to find out if it's haunted or not.
We'll have to do a seance there soon.
No, we're not going to haunt my room of requirement. It's my special room. I look forward to sharing with you guys what all I discover in this room. If it is indeed haunted, it will be haunted with books and with ideas, and we may podcast from there at some point. But in the meantime, it's time to remember that if you haven't joined our Patreon yet, at patreon.com/homespunhaints,
we're about to reveal a new secret, a secret commercial just for you.
It's actually not new, but here it is.
Oh.
You have to listen to the same old damn commercial over and over again. Join our Patreon.
Oh man, I had a rough day.
What happened, honey?
I was out with the guys and they said I wasn't spooky enough.
Oh, honey, how could they say that to you? You're hella spooky.
You think so?
Of course. After all, you came up with the ectoplasm being ghost jizz theory, and you've been scratched by more horny ghosts than anyone else I know.
Well, I suppose you're right.
But if you're really worried about it, I have just the thing.
Oh, wow! A Spooky AF t-shirt?
That's right. Our Spooky AF line comes in shirt, sweatshirt, pillow, and even a high-quality mug.
Man, those are super awesome, especially for something with profanity on it.
What's even better, all these items were hand-lettered exclusively for Homespun Haints by world-renowned calligrapher Nikki Malik.
Holy ghostly cannoli, that's amazing.
From now on, whenever you brandish your Spooky AF gear, no one will accuse you of being boring.
Yeah, I'm Spooky AF.
Visit homespunhaints.com for all Spooky AF merchandise. Today on the show, we are thrilled to bring on author Beth Castrodale. She is the author of 4 books. The 4th one is coming out in September, and it's, as you can imagine, spooky. She also has had a creepy story of her own to share with us today. So we are thrilled to have her on today, calling in from Boston. Beth, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for hosting me. I'm really excited to be here.
So tell us about your books. Are they a series or are they individual novels?
They're individual novels and they're very different from each other. The first one was about a scandal-fleeing corset maker during the Depression.
Ooh.
Yeah, to kind of discover some family secrets along the way. And the second novel was about a former indie rock star turned gravedigger who kind of is trying to overcome his guilt-ridden past and see if he can get back to making music. The third novel is like a road trip of two half sisters who kind of reconnect, and their father's a career criminal, so they kind of make a road trip to like kind of clean up some of his unfinished business, and they get into trouble. And then so that one was fun to write. And then this new one is a book I've always wanted to write. It's a modern Gothic novel about a struggling artist who inherits a house from a great aunt that she never really knew. And the house was built by a 19th century architect whose homes were supposed to influence the mind in beneficial ways, but it's not really clear in this house what the house is doing, and if it's haunted, if it's the architecture's fault, or if it's the fault of some other creepy stuff that's going on. She's trying to figure that out. So,
cool. It sounds
Yeah.
excellent. I love a good Gothic horror novel. That sounds brilliant. I love it.
Oh,
Can't wait
thanks.
to
Well,
read it.
if you read it, I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. We will definitely read that.
Yeah.
What is the name of the novel?
It's called The Inhabitants.
And that's going to be coming out in September, you said?
Exactly. Yep. September 10th, to be exact.
So where can people find your books?
I always recommend, if people could do it, is to order from the publisher, which is Regal House Publishing.
Okay.
Because that way they support an indie press. But they can get it in all the regular spots. If your bookstore doesn't have it, you can request them to carry it.
Is it on pre-order now, The Inhabitants?
Yeah, it's definitely pre-orderable.
We'll have a link to that on our show notes for this episode.
Oh, thank you.
At
Thank you so much.
homespunhaints.com. I'm noticing a theme. So the graveyards, the indie rock, the corsets. You're a goth kid, weren't you?
I never described myself that way but I think I am. I definitely I think I must be, right? I would attach that label with honor, I have to say.
We're still trying to navigate the waters of being goth when you're in your 40s. It's Becky goes and reads tarot by the pool while her kids swim. It's we figure it out day by day.
I have a reputation in my neighborhood.
That's the best reputation of all, in my opinion.
It is. So Beth, as Diana said, there is this theme running through these books. Do you have any past experiences that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, this was years and years ago, and I was living on Cape Cod and working there, and I had this beautiful apartment near the ocean. It was probably like, if I had to guess, I'd guess it was like 50 yards from the ocean. You can hear the waves at night. Like, even when the windows were closed in the winter, you could hear the waves. And it was like this little shingled house that was attached to the landlord's apartment. Was like, their house was attached, and this was like an attached house. Just cute little, 2-story apartment. I never felt creeped out in there, but it was just like curious things started happening. Like, a couple months after I moved in, I would go to work, and I was pretty religious about making sure everything's locked up, like windows, doors, and everything. And then I remember coming home, and all the casement windows upstairs were open, and then the thermostat was just turned up to the max. And it didn't make any, it was like warm weather. It was May. And I thought, I just can't imagine why this happened. And actually the landlord, a couple of days after, he said, because I was thinking like, did you go into my apartment? And he actually said, do you mind keeping your windows closed? Because we noticed they're open. And usually the landlords are really good about telling me if anyone was going to come in, if any workers. And no one else had the key to the apartment but me or them. So I thought, whatever, this is just weird. And then it was probably like a few weeks later, the exact same thing happened. At this point, I'm kind of freaking out. I mean, it's kind of weird because it didn't feel like there were any of that creepy crawly stuff where I felt like people talk about cold spots or something like that. There wasn't anything like that, but it just made me feel like there was something strange going on. I think we try to connect things, sort of make a meaning of it. I remember a mutual friend of the landlord's and me, she said that their daughter had died. She lived in that apartment for a while, and she died not that long before, around the age of 30. So, I mean, in my mind, I thought maybe could it be a connection? But then I thought maybe that's just me trying to make a narrative connection that doesn't exist. But I was just reaching for what could explain it, and I never have been able to explain it, unfortunately.
Oh, wow.
Did you ask the landlords? Did you say, I didn't go in there? Did something happen?
I was afraid to ask them, I think partly because of the whole thing with their daughter. But I did confide in some friends, very close friends. I was a little bit nervous about like telling other people, but there was a woman I worked with who believed in supernatural things, and she said that she could come in and sage things. And I said, there's no need for that. I felt like that I would just kind of let it pass. And then I ended up moving in with my boyfriend at the time, not too long after.
Wow. So maybe if she was dead, maybe she was cold. And she was just trying to warm up.
Oh, that's interesting.
Do you happen to know how she passed?
I heard that she had some type of cancer. She worked with a lot of different kind of like metallic pigments apparently, and my friend said maybe some of the toxic substances in her pigments or something. Because she was very young. I mean, she was either just a little bit before 30 or maybe right around 30. So it's an awful thing to happen with anyone, but she was definitely premature for that to happen for sure.
So your latest book, you talk of architecture that can influence the mind. Is that something that you researched, or is that something that you came up with on your own? I am curious about this.
Yeah.
I thought about it on my own, but I definitely think there's resonance with the way that architects think about architecture. And something I reference in my book is that the architect who built the house that the story is set in, he helped to build mental asylums, and he was trying to think of architecture that would be soothing or helpful to the patients. And I think some of the architecture movement around mental asylums was trying to have like those open spaces and long corridors and views and places where patients could feel more settled. There's also the idea of fresh air coming in and that sort of thing. So I think there is definitely a real history of that. I've done some other reading that does talk about how important, psychologically and mentally having architectural forms that are pleasing and soothing and so forth can really be taken into account by architects.
So in your research, did you ever encounter any research that's been done or any studies that have been done that can create architecture that has the opposite effect, that can actually cause you to feel stressed or feel like you're seeing things?
It's funny. I didn't come across that directly, but I personally have felt that way myself. It's certain settings, like this isn't a house, but I think of the current Penn Station in New York City.
Uh-huh.
It's like the worst. I don't know if you've spent any time in there. They made that thing so you want to get the hell out of there as soon as you can. It's just like these low ceilings. You just feel like you're gonna, like you almost want to just flee the scene. And I think of the old Penn Station was torn down before I was born, but it was supposed to be this glorious place, with the beautiful architecture. And I think sometimes public architecture, depending on how it's created, can either make us feel invited and just in awe and not like something that just makes our skin crawl or makes us panic. I don't know if it was intentional on the architect's part, but sometimes, or maybe it's just my personal biases about some architecture that I feel like some of it is just definitely so off-putting, and other architecture makes me feel open and interested and calm. I hope it wasn't the architect's goal to make me feel bad, but I sometimes wonder.
Well, it is weird because Penn Station, like they have the markets and the shops and all of that stuff going on in it. But you're right. When you go into it, you're kind of like, I feel like I'm not supposed to be here.
Exactly.
It is very oppressive. I've always been rushing whenever I've been in Penn Station, but I feel like I'm always like in a basement, whether or not I'm actually in a basement.
Totally. Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. In a basement, it feels like the ceiling is getting lower and lower the more you go in there.
You're like, I just need to find my train and get out of here.
Exactly. But the architect of my novel, I definitely had the idea that thinking of the occupants of his space, and I think he had good intentions, but sometimes maybe those didn't come across. So.
One thing that we have talked about on this show, there's actually some architectural precedents. In the Victorian era, there was this idea that ghosts could get trapped in acute angles or in corners or things like that. And that's one reason why people often think Victorian homes are haunted, because there's all that great detailed work. And it's almost like dust, right? If dust can get trapped in there, then ghosts can get trapped in there. And there's also a building in Chicago, outside of Chicago, in Bull Run, Illinois, that is designed with absolutely no right angles. It's all curved walls because the owners held seances regularly in the house. They had lost like 12 children and they would hold these seances to commune with their children, and they were afraid if they had any corners anywhere in the house that whatever they spoke to would get stuck there. So it's interesting that you talked about the oppressive ceiling and the feeling of being closed in, and that actually fits in with a lot of these theories about how ghosts work. But again, is that just our psyche? who knows, if we feel trapped, if we feel claustrophobic, if we know dust is probably caught in these corners and spiders are in these corners, then what does that do to us psychologically? Which also makes it interesting what you were talking about with your Cape Cod home, because I am envisioning this just gorgeous cottage right on the ocean. I mean, you described it so well. I could tell you're definitely an author. The way you described it, I could picture it in my head and hear the seagulls. And it sounds like that was just such a bright, open space that I could see why you wouldn't want to sage it, because if there was somebody there, it sounds like they were enjoying themselves.
That's such a good point. It really is. And I feel like I didn't feel scared. That's the thing. I mean, I didn't feel like I want this person or whatever to leave. I didn't feel like I was panicking at all. And I think you really hit on something. And I think it was in my subconscious mind that I don't know that anything needs to be moved along. If anything, I mean, if it was this woman, this daughter, she lived there, right? So why not let her be around?
Well, it was her place first. I mean, gosh, that sounds like a gorgeous place to haunt. I wouldn't mind being there.
I know.
Right?
I always felt comforted there, even after this stuff happened, like just the ocean. And it was never anything where I felt off-put by it.
Getting back to the architecture of the house in your novel, one thing that I love about Gothic haunted house novels is the house itself is a character. And it sounds like that's definitely the case in your novel as well, that the house is a character, the house has a soul, the house has a personality. Would you say that that rings true with your novel?
Oh, absolutely. I hope that people will feel that way when they read the book, that the house is very much a character. And when you're inhabiting a spot like that, you're trying to figure out what exactly is this character? Is this like someone benign, indifferent? Do they have an agenda? And I was trying to get that across. I talk about the architect and how his son was very opposed to his father's work and had a house built next to his and tore out all the features that he felt were, I don't want that influence on me. So, it's kind of pushing away his father as well as the architecture.
Well, yeah, because when we create any kind of art, as you know, as an author, we do kind of infuse it with a little bit of our own soul.
Oh, yes.
Can you share a little bit about where you live now? Are you in Boston proper? How old is the dwelling that you're in now?
So I live in a neighborhood of Boston called Jamaica Plain. It's a Victorian house, and it was built. We heard different things. We've heard anything from 1888 to 1897. It's kind of not really clear, but it's a Queen Anne. It's 3 floors. Each one is a different dwelling unit, and it was always built that way. We look back at the census for the house, and it's always working people who lived here.
And you've never experienced anything spooky in your current house?
Nothing that I can think of.
Well, it sounds like it was always just full of life and excitement. And would you say that your current house has a soul?
Oh, very much so. I mean, it's funny. It's ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to live in an old house. And I always feel like part of the reason for that is that I feel like the more space is occupied over the time, you feel like a sense of it being inhabited and accumulates over time, right? And I feel like even if I have no idea about anyone else who lived here, what their lives were like, I feel kind of comforted by knowing that. And I feel like sometimes brand new houses, they feel a little hollow to me. Not to say that they can't be beautiful and people can love living in them. But for me personally, I like that comfort of having time and history and other people's lives being there.
It's kind of like having a seasoned cast iron skillet.
Yeah, exactly.
Based on your experience writing this novel and your research, if I wanted to be an evil architect and build a house specifically to terrify people, what would be the architectural features that I would have to include?
I think of like what scares me personally in a house, feeling like you're trapped somehow. Anytime you have a situation where you go upstairs and you don't know where you're going, or you go into a room and you can't figure out a way to get out. Also, when there's not enough light, any place to put you in a dark space or where you can't see anything, or you feel like you're cut off from a lot of sensory input, complete silence, complete darkness, anything like that. So I think a mastermind would try to set you loose and turn off your senses and block you from finding your way out.
Okay, so hard to leave, not enough light, and complete silence.
And then you only have your own mind.
I think one of the scariest situations I was ever in was I was living in Chicago, but working way out in a suburb. and I had a long 1.5-hour drive home from work, and this fog settled in. We get these fogs out there in the Midwest because there's no mountains or anything to break it up. It's just flat. And I was driving home for an 1.5 hours through cornfields, and I knew I was out in the open, but I couldn't see anything. And I had to roll down my window and listen for my tires on the road to make sure I was still on the road. And that was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. And it wasn't because I couldn't see. It was just felt so claustrophobic, like the fog was going to eat me or something. Like I didn't know it was out there.
That sounds absolutely terrifying to me. I mean, it really, in your description of just having to roll down the windows, and that sounds terrifying.
Beth, I am really, really looking forward to reading your novel. It sounds just like our cup of tea.
Oh, yeah.
I think all of our listeners will enjoy it as well.
Oh, thank you.
And again, the name of your book is The Inhabitants from Regal House Publishing. And what is the website of Regal House so people can order it directly?
It's regalhousepublishing.com.
And as Beth mentioned earlier, if you have a local bookstore, it would be awesome to support them as well. You can always request that they get Beth's books. Tell us the names of your other books that are already published.
Yes, so the first one is called Marian Hatley. The second one is In This Ground. That's the cemetery one. And then the third one is I Mean You No Harm. And that's about the sisters on the road trip.
Well, I can't wait to gobble all of those up. Beth, do you have a website where people can visit?
Yes, it's BethCastrodale.com.
We will have links to all of that on our website at homespunhaints.com. Beth, this has been such a joy to talk to you.
Oh, thank you both so much. I so appreciate your hosting me, and I'm very grateful. So,
Haunted Loves, if you're a longtime listener, you now know how to buy a haunted house, how to sell a haunted house, and how to build a haunted house so that you can have a spooky day.
Homespun Haints is hosted by Becky Kielimnik and Diana Doty, and produced by Homespun Haints Media LLC. Editing and music by Becky Kielimnik. Show notes by Diana Doty. If you have a ghost story and you'd like to be considered as a guest for this podcast, please visit our website at homespunhaints.com/submit.